Mr. Putin needs a ceasefire more than Ukraine needs a ceasefire. His army has been beaten up to the point that he's having to ask North Koreans to retake Russian land. And now we see some modicum of Middle Eastern fighters being introduced to help Russia. Russia is desperate for manpower, and they need a ceasefire to refit and refurb. And Mr. Putin is doing a very good job of convincing the West that him giving a ceasefire is a concession. I tell you, rather, he needs it worse than we do, and we need to make sure we don't give it away in the negotiations.
So just two questions based on your answer there. And when you say you would go further than what President Zelensky is proposing in theory, what would you suggest? How much further?
Mr. Putin has to lose something in these negotiations, because he's asking Ukraine to lose everything in these negotiations. He's even asking for land in the 4 eastern oblasts that he hasn't taken yet. He wants us to capitulate and give him that land. And so I would start off with how much land is Mr. Putin going to give back in order to do his side of these negotiations. We're going to see Ukraine is going to have to give up land. The whole world has already decided that. It's land for peace kind of thing. But what we need to do is start out the negotiations at a place where Mr. Putin has to lose land. It is important, I would tell you, in the large scheme of things, that Russians see that Mr. Putin has to give up land. It's extremely important.
And by that, what do you mean? I mean, what happens to Crimea? What happens to Kursk, for example?
So this is really what we need to talk to Mr. Zelensky about. For us to dictate Zelensky's terms would be horrible. We need to talk to President Zelensky about what he thinks the Ukrainian people can stand as far as an outcome. And most commentators who have military background have said the same thing that I say over and over. Crimea is the most important land in this negotiation, because if Russia remains completely in control of Crimea and continues to use it as a weapons platform to dictate terms in the northern Black Sea, and use it as he has in the past to cut the trade routes out of Ukraine through the northern Black Sea and into the Mediterranean, this is horrible. So I think that when President Zelensky decides what is his terms and what his people can deal with, then we start talking from there. I have heard things like give away some of the Donbass, but get back the Crimea. I have heard various intonations of that. But the fact of the matter is, Mr. Putin is going to have to give up land. His people need to see that he gives up land in these negotiations, or it's not going to go well for Ukraine and the West.
Because there's an important precedent here at stake that you cannot just be seen to be able to take land and change borders by force.
3 times you've heard me say this on your show before. In 2008, the West's response was inadequate to task, and we rewarded bad behavior by allowing Mr. Putin to hang on to land. In 2014, the West's response was inadequate to task, and we allowed Mr. Putin to be rewarded for his bad behavior by giving him about 12% of the most important commercial parts of Ukraine. And now in 2024, we are, if according to some, we are setting ourselves up for a third time reward bad behavior. And just as you said, this is an important point that we cannot accept Mr. Putin amassing his land army, marching across internationally recognized borders, and subjugating portions of his neighbors. That behavior will repeat itself if we continue to allow it.
And just one other thing you said that President Putin needs this ceasefire. Do you think he is in a position that he wants negotiations now then?
He wants them on his terms. He's been very clear. I think the most demonstrative thing about this narrative in the last week or so, 10 days, is Mr. Trump and Mr. Putin had a conversation. Mr. Trump told Putin not to accelerate the problem, not to exacerbate the fighting, and so forth. And it's pretty clear that Mr. Putin has shown his contempt for that position, because he launched now 3 or 4 of the largest raids of drones and long-range missiles into Ukraine, and he's introduced North Korean forces where his forces are hurting, and now even we believe that there are forces provided via the Houthis that are fighting as well in this area. So Mr. Putin is desperate for manpower. He cannot stand another mobilization in his country because of the political pressures, and he wants this fight to stop on his terms so that he can get well in his army. And then he'll be back. Again, we reward bad behavior, we reward bad behavior, and we reward bad behavior. He will be back.
The British Prime Minister, in his first foreign policy speech, said Ukraine needed to be put in the strongest possible position before any negotiations over a peace deal. What needs to happen then?
Well, I completely agree with him. And this is what I and a pretty august group of former military people in America have been trying to work with our government to adopt a similar position. I think it means several things. One is not about forces, tanks, airplanes, or anything. It's about policy. The West needs to state a policy which says we are not going to tolerate you amassing your land army and at your will marching across internationally recognized borders and attacking your neighbors. It's not going to be tolerated, and we will support those who defend against you. And then a clear, publicly stated policy about support to Ukraine and what it means. No more of this will be there as long as it takes. That doesn't mean anything. We're going to be there as long as it takes to defeat Russia and expel them from Ukraine. That's a proposed position. That would be much more demonstrative than we take now. So we need a strong policy first. And then secondarily, we need to give Ukraine the tools that it needs. Ukraine has demonstrated over and over in this 10-year-long war that when they're given what they need, they can defeat the Russians. And so we have to make the decision to do that. I support what your leadership in the UK is saying.
And the outgoing US Secretary of State Antony Blinken made his final visit to NATO headquarters this week, pledging to Russia another $725 million worth of military equipment to Ukraine before the inauguration of Donald Trump. What more do you think President Zelensky can actually do between now and the inauguration to shore up the new administration's support?
Well, I think that it's going to be really important that we not allow a rift between Ukraine and the United States. I think it's really important that we, people who are not in the official government, but who talk to those in the government as this new administration comes aboard, it's important that we advocate a position that says we cannot continue to reward bad behavior by Russia. We have to stop it at some point. And we need to talk to them about what we're doing to support Ukraine. Very few Americans understand. The people on the TV are really poorly informed, or they're well informed, but they're mismanaging the message. They keep using this term, we're giving Ukraine all this money. We're not giving Ukraine a bunch of money. This is not the Iran deal where we sent them crates and stacks of money. We're not doing that. When that 700 plus million that they're talking about, the lion's share of that will go to U.S. companies who are building weapons that replace in our active force the weapons that are outdated or older that we are giving to Ukraine. And so the money that is being given to Ukraine is actually going to American households, Walmarts, gas stations, car dealerships, and all the things that Americans spend money on, because the money, the lion's share of it, is paying for new kit going into our military to backfill what we are giving away.
And there's no question that the decision-making of the support for Ukraine by the Biden administration has been painfully slow and lacking in strategy, as you've already expressed your frustration. Are we any closer to actually understanding what President Trump's foreign policy agenda will be on Ukraine? No. And well, could he add some actual urgency to the situation, do you think?
So one of the things that I think, whether you like the individual or not, one of the things we need to remember is that President Trump is actually been pretty successful in getting things done through the kind of maneuvering you're seeing him do out there right now. A 30-second example. So everybody was in great woe and worry about his words about, I'm going to pull troops out of Germany, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, in his last administration. Here are the facts. Here are 3 facts that are easily verifiable. During that Trump administration, more American soldiers went to Europe. They didn't come out. The numbers in Europe increased. We started putting the forces in the 3 Baltic nations, in Poland and Romania. And so troop levels increased. Our investment in U.S. military infrastructure in Europe to receive forces and to address an issue of an attacking Russia increased. And our big exercises increased. In fact, Trident Juncture was one of the biggest exercises since Reforger. So for all of the things he said, actually the opposite happened. And what also did happen is now we have 23 nations in NATO who are meeting their investment goals. And more will happen in the next year. I've heard as many as 4 more will meet their goals in the next year. So for all of the hard tweets or all of the tough language, our situation with our allies in Europe has improved as a result of what Trump did back then. So I think what we need to do now is look at his maneuvers, see what he's telling Mr. Putin and how Mr. Putin reacts, see what he's telling our allies and how they react, and then we'll see how this plays out once he's elected, or once he's installed. Sorry.
You've been watching Frontline for Times Radio with me, Kate Gerbeau. If you'd like to be the first to get exclusive content, you can sign up for membership with the link below. You can also listen to Times Radio for the latest news or read it on thetimes.com. My thanks to our producer today, Louis Sykes, and to you for watching. Bye for now.